I want to try something a little reckless. I want to hand you a whole of 6 birds in one breath, right at the start, and then spend the rest of this video earning it. So here is the smallest, honest version of it I know. Here's the one-line version, and then we'll take it apart slowly, so don't worry about catching all of it yet. When you want to know whether something new is really going on inside a system, 6 birds walks you through the same set of questions, in order. What's really happening down at the level of the moving parts? How much of that can we even see? What can that view actually let us say or ask? When do we bundle the same stuff into one bigger thing and treat it as a single object? Does that bigger thing follow a clean rule of its own? And how do we keep ourselves honest about every answer along the way? Those questions line up with the boxes in this diagram: process, lens, vocabulary, packaging, law, and audit. Think of them as a roadmap for the rest of the video, and underneath the boxes, 3 little lights, marked stable, new, and directed. We'll come back to all 3 near the end and pull them apart, one at a time. Quick clarification because the name invites it. These 6 boxes are a teaching scaffold, a way to get oriented. They are not the 6 core moves the theory is actually named after, the 6 birds, which are a deeper topic for another day. Everything from here is just us working through these 6 boxes, slowly enough that each one ends up feeling obvious. But before we start, let me tell you the one thing I'm not claiming. I'm not handing you a finished theory of everything. Think of 6 birds as a shared set of questions, a common way of asking about how things form that you can carry from one field to another. The questions may travel well. That is the honest claim, and I will only make it once. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Even if the questions travel, every place you take them still has to do its own homework, its own math, its own computer simulations, its own experiments, and its own honesty about what is actually shown. Pointing this diagram at a hard problem does not solve the problem. It just tells you which bills you now owe. So, for the next several minutes, you and I are going to walk left to right across that diagram, one box at a time, and watch the whole one-line idea put itself together. Let's start at the far left, with the first question. Before you ask whether anything new is going on, you have to say what is even going on. What's the stuff in play? Picture a tray, with moving pieces inside it. Into that tray, you put everything you've decided matters for your question. The states a thing can be in, its history, the events, the records you actually have. 6 birds has a name for the tray, the carrier. But the name is the least interesting part. The interesting part is the one easy-to-miss word that comes with it. You decide it. Because the tray is not the whole world. It's the slice of the world you choose to put under the microscope. And the edge of that tray is quietly doing a lot of work. It says what you let in, what you left out, and therefore, what kind of answer your model could ever possibly give you. What goes in the tray depends on what you're studying. If you're studying a single bit of information, it might be a handful of tiny internal states and the ways they flip between each other. If you're studying something like a custom or an institution, it might be the back and forth history of people dealing with each other, the signals everyone can see, and the choices they make later. If you're studying a corner of physics, it might be configurations, paths, measurement records, same tray, wildly different contents. And here is where you feel why that word, you decided, matters so much. Watch what happens when you change what's in the tray. Drop in one hidden lever that had been sitting just outside the edge, and the answer can flip. Take memory out of the tray, and a whole institution can quietly disappear from your model, as if it were never there. Same world, different choice about what to look at, and now, really, a different question. So the first thing 6 birds asks is not the grand cosmic one, what is the universe ultimately made of? It's the humble one. What exactly are we looking at here? And what records do we actually have? Alright, you've said what's happening. Next question, who's looking? And what are they looking through? This is the second box. 6 birds calls it the lens. And I want to head off the obvious guess right away. A lens here is not about zooming in or out. A lens is basically what you're allowed to notice in the first place. It's the difference between a black and white camera and a color one. Same scene, but one of them simply can't tell red from green, no matter how hard it looks. Let me show you with one picture. Here is a city. Now lay a subway map over it. A subway map keeps the connections and the order of the stops, and lets almost everything else fade away. Through this lens, you can ask whether you can get from this station to that one. What you cannot ask is how steep the hill between them is. That hill isn't a difference this map can even see. It's not there to be noticed. Now swap it for a hiking map, the kind with the elevation lines. Suddenly, the hills are everything, and the order of the subway stops melts away. Same city though. A completely different set of things survives the look. And here's the part I really want to land. The list of questions a lens even lets you ask. 6birds calls that the layer's vocabulary. It's just the menu of things you're able to say. A zoning map can answer what's this neighborhood zoned for. The subway map simply can't. Its lens hands you a menu of questions you can ask and grays out the rest. Not as wrong answers, but as questions you can't even form here. This is why what counts as real thing depends on which lens you're using. A commuter route can be a perfectly real object on the subway map and completely invisible on the hiking map. And invisible does not mean it doesn't exist. It means this particular way of looking just can't put the question into words. So a layer in this whole story is not a zoom setting you dial up or down. What sets one apart is its interface, and what you get to notice, and what you can then say about it. Which differences survive the lens, and which sentences you can build once they do. Now we get to the part where, for me, the word emergence stops being a vibe and becomes something you can actually point at. I call it packaging, but stay with the picture. Packaging does two things at once. It bundles together a bunch of detailed cases that you've decided to treat as the same, and it gives each bundle one simple stand-in. Think of a pile of loose paperwork sorted into folders. Thousands of pages might differ in ways that just don't matter for what you're doing right now. So the folder swallows them up, and the cover sheet on the front becomes the thing the next person actually uses. You stop hauling around the pages, you carry the cover. But here's the catch, and it matters. Slapping a label on a folder doesn't make it a solid, reliable thing. You have to check that the bundling has actually settled down, and is not still shifting underneath you. And the test for that is satisfyingly simple. Run the bundling rule once. Loose pages become a tidy cover sheet. Now run it a second time on the cover sheet you just made. If nothing changes, if the cover comes back exactly the same, or close enough to call it the same by a margin you wrote down in advance, then the rule has recognized its own handiwork. It's settled. And that settling is exactly what 6birds means by an object that has actually formed. And I want to be careful right here, because this is exactly where people start overpromising. That solidness always comes with fine print. Solid through this lens, at this time scale, and to this margin. There's no perfect view from nowhere. True everywhere object hiding inside the word emergent. If somebody quietly drops the fine print, they've changed what they're claiming. You can watch this happen in the two examples we keep coming back to. With a bit of information, several tiny internal states collapse into one clean 0 or 1 only if that bundle stays usable as the system keeps running. With an institution, a whole tangle of different histories folds into one shared, predictable state, only if that state is steady enough to be recognized and used again next time. Getting that object to actually form is the whole game right here. But forming the object is only half the job. And this next part is where a lot of emergent stories quietly cheat, so stay with me. Say you've dropped two different fine-grained situations into the same big folder, same cover sheet. Now ask the key question: do they lead to the same future? Because if those two situations head off toward different outcomes, then your folder is hiding a difference that still matters. And it's not enough to run on its own. Picture two roads fitting into one tunnel, and you've labeled that tunnel, these are the same now. If the cars come out the far side, heading for different cities, then the tunnel buried a difference the road ahead still cares about. Now, you can always paper over that with an average, a rule that's roughly right on average, but a rough average is not proof that the big picture story really holds together. It's a best fit line, not a guarantee. That gap between where the roads actually go and the tidy average you drew over them is the thing 6birds is measuring. When that gap is bigger than 0, it is telling you exactly what those two roads did. The details you tried to file away still change what happens next. The bundle can still be a perfectly real object. What you don't have yet is a single clean rule it follows on its own. If you saw the earlier video on bits, you've already met this exact trap. There was a little logic gate, and its single bit output matched the expected answer perfectly. In the one case that was tested, looked flawless, and yet it failed a complete description because a hidden wire still mattered for the very next step. The answer was right. The story behind it was incomplete. So an object isn't lawful just because you named it. And a single right answer doesn't mean you've captured the whole state. The bundle has to support two things at once: a thing you can recognize and a future you can actually predict from it. Two jobs, not one. Okay, say you've done all of that. You got a solid object and it follows a clean rule. Here's a question that sounds almost philosophical but has a surprisingly sharp answer. Is there actually anything new up here at this level? And the surprising answer is not necessarily. A perfectly solid, perfectly lawful level can contain nothing new at all. Here's why. If your bundling rule already agrees with itself, then running it again and again gets you nowhere new. After that first clean pass, repeating it just hands you back the same thing. It does not build you an endless staircase of higher and higher levels. The counter stops at one. So whether something is new has to be a different question. Not, can I keep running the rule? It's, could the old way of describing things even put this new distinction into words at all, using only what it already has? Here's the picture I like for this. Take a black and white photo. You can sharpen it, copy it, run it through filters forever, and you will never pull out a color that was never recorded. To tell red from green, working harder with the old photo will not save you. The camera itself has to change. You need a new way of capturing the world, not a better way of polishing the old capture. 6birds calls it genuinely new exactly when the new distinction is something the old description could never have reached, no matter how cleverly you rearranged it. And notice what this is and what it isn't. It's new compared to where you were standing. It is not magic out of nothing. You point at the old description, you point at the new one, and then you point at the exact thing the old one could never say. For a bit, the new description might hold on to a hidden lever that the old one had thrown away. For an institution, the new description might track a state that depends on the whole history, which the old one-shot view never carried. Just running the same bundling over and over can keep a story steady, but climbing to a new level takes a change in what you can see, or say, or settle. Now we can do something I think is useful. We can pull apart three different claims that emergence stories love to mash together into one triumphant word. Three separate checks. Remember those three lights from the start? Light 1, stable. Does a real, reliable object actually form at the level you cared about? Light 2, new. Does the next level hold something the previous one couldn't reach? Light 3, directed. Does the system itself have a built-in arrow of time? And here's the plain version of that. If I played you a film of it, could you tell whether it was running forwards or backwards, the way a smashed egg never unsmashes itself? Some systems have that real forward versus backward difference, plenty of others do not. And here's the whole point. None of these lights switches on the others. They're independent. Let me show you that independence with a few quick examples. Take a rule that crashes every single input down to one blank dot. That's about as stable as anything gets. Run it again, still the dot. But it adds basically nothing new. So stable does not mean new. Now take that new color camera we just talked about. It adds a real distinction, red versus green, and on its own, it creates no arrow of time whatsoever. So new does not mean directed. And here's the sneakiest one. Picture a recipe that goes to A, then B, then C in a strict order. Feels like it's pointing forward, right? But the actual machinery underneath can run perfectly fine backward, with no real forward versus backward difference at all. The order was in the recipe you followed, not in the system itself, so a sequence does not mean an arrow. which means an arrow of time has to bring its own evidence. You actually have to catch the system behaving differently forward than backward. Steady bundling can't stand in for it. The road gap can't. Stability can't. Newness can't. The arrow needs its own separate proof. Full stop. Keeping those three apart is one of the main safety features of the whole thing. So, whenever you hear someone say emergent, I want you to have a reflex. Ask them, solidly formed, new, or truly directed? Which one are you claiming, and where's your evidence for it? Which brings us to the last box on the diagram, all the way over to the right, the honesty log. And I want to be clear about what kind of thing it is, because the dry name actually undersells it. This log records where your claim came from, what you compared it against, what you threw away to get a clean answer, what's still broken, and what you're actually allowed to conclude from all of it. It's not a disclaimer you tack on at the very end. It's built into the thing from the start. It also tracks where its claim stands. Is this still just a hunch? Has it been accepted, but only under the conditions you spelled out? Is the new thing truly new, or only sort of? Did some check fail outright? Or is the question simply outside what this model can speak to at all? And that standing changes what the result actually means. A gorgeous chart with nothing to back it up stays a maybe. A solid-looking bundle that still has that leak we talked about can flunk the test. And something you proved true inside a small toy model can be rock solid inside that toy and still tell you nothing by itself about the wider world. Now, right about here, a fair objection is taking shape, and I'd rather say it out loud than let it nag you. Isn't this just a checklist with fancy new names? And the honest answer is, an empty checklist proves nothing. None of the values in the boxes. It's all in what fills them. The actual math, the measured flows, the proofs that something can't happen, the counterexamples, the simulations, the experiments, the hard work of connecting all of this to your specific field. The questions organize the work. They absolutely do not let you skip it. 6 Birds is a toolkit for building these layered explanations and for keeping yourself honest while you do. The honesty log is how the building stays honest. It is not the whole point of the building. So let me close the loop the way I promised at the start, by earning that one sentence. Let's take that blank set of questions and drop 2 completely different worlds into it. For a bit of information, what's happening is a small system flipping between internal states. The lens groups those states into candidate, zeros and ones. The lens exposes the public signals and how people behave later. The packaging proposes a shared social state. The future check asks whether that state lets you reliably predict what comes next. The newness question asks whether it captures something a single one-off interaction never could. And the honesty log brings in proper controls planned ahead of time. Shuffled comparisons, timing, and what happens when you flip the order of play. The role labels line up perfectly. The actual stuff, the math, and the evidence do not. And that's the only unity I'm claiming, said carefully. A shared set of questions that lets you ask sharper things, that catches the same kinds of mistake, and that makes you say out loud where a connection is still missing. It is not a claim that a bit and an institution are the same physical thing. Evidence does not jump the gap between them, and nailing the answer in one world does not prove a single thing about the other. Each one earns its own evidence on its own. So let's hear the one-line version one more time, only now every word in it should have somewhere to land. A 6-bird study, in one breath, names what's happening, how much of it you can see, what that view lets you say, the rule that bundles all of it into solid objects, the tests for whether those objects follow a clean rule of their own, and the honesty log that keeps every claim in its place. Emergence is a solid object honestly forming inside all of that. A new level means a change the old description simply couldn't reach, and an arrow of time needs its own forward versus backward evidence. That's the map. It is not yet the proof for any one application, and I told you right at the start I wouldn't pretend otherwise. The rest of the series is where the definitions, the examples, the ways things break, and the field-by-field tests actually get filled in. And the first piece to really get your hands on is the one on the far left. The setup itself. What's happening, what you can see, and the questions that view lets you ask. That's where we go next.